Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I am here for a discussion video for you guys. Now, this is a topic that I thought of actually kind of recently. Thought it would be interesting to talk about. So, for this discussion video, as you can see by the title, once a fan, always a fan. So maybe some of you don't know what I mean by this, and maybe some of you do know. Obviously, we all have bands that, we take super seriously, some bands that we have nostalgic feelings for, and some bands that, we've been a fan of for a long time, and maybe we're maybe growing out of some of these bands. Maybe some of these bands are not doing as much for me as much as they used to. Now, I've done videos before about bands that I used to like or have grown off of me or whatever. I've actually done 2 list videos of that, so if you want to go check those out, you can go search for them on my channel. So what I mean by this is, people that, of course, are maybe fans of a band, and they feel like, well, the first time you become a fan, that's it. You're always going to be a fan of that band. And I feel like sometimes it is by force. I feel like with some people feel like that they have to continue to be in this band's fan base just because they were like years ago. Like, new band's music's coming out, I gotta check it out, Now, there's nothing wrong with that in particular, because the curiosity is always going to be there, okay? And that's something I will get into. But I'm here to tell you that you don't have to, be a fan of a band just because you were years ago. And I feel like something that a lot of people have this problem, that just because a band is their first band, it has to mean that they're their favorite band. Like, I know some people whose favorite bands are Skillet, Breaking Benjamin, maybe even Demon Hunter, I don't know. But there's some people that, will list some of these bands as their favorite bands simply because they're nothing more than just because of the fact that they're some of the first bands that they've gotten into. But I'm here to tell you that first band does not mean favorite band, or at least it doesn't have to mean that. Now, in some cases, I think it's fine, if your first band does end up being your favorite band, if you genuinely love the band. But I feel like in most cases, it really just has to do with, nostalgia going through the roof, of course, and there are some people that have heard better music. Like, there's some people that have heard better music than the bands that, they claim to be their favorites, but still claim these bands to be their favorites. And I feel like that's because it has nothing to do with nothing more than just nostalgia, of course. I mean, I think there's no other way around it. And sometimes it is okay to let go of bands that you were a fan of for a long time, or even just a few years. Back in the day, like, this is something that I had to realize and tell myself recently. Anytime a band would come out with new music, of course, when a band would release a new album and it's from a band that I have been a fan of for a while, I had to tell myself, it doesn't mean that I still have to buy the album or even listen to the album. One example that I can think of, and one thing that comes to mind for me, is August Burns Red's latest album, Guardians. To tell you the truth, I haven't even heard that album yet, and I honestly have no desire to listen to it. Because, well, for one, I just know what to expect. It's just going to be another August Burns Red album. An album that screams all the way through, your typical riffs, and, I get, you could say that about most metalcore, but August Burns Red is especially a very samey band. So, yeah, I have no desire to listen to the latest August Burns Red album, to be quite honest with you guys. I just can't drive myself to even check it out, I guess, and that's an example of, learning to just let go of bands. If a band is not doing, that much for you, it's okay to not be a fan of that band anymore. You don't have to force yourself to drive yourself to listen to a band's album just because you were a fan of the band for a while or something, or maybe a few years. So that's what I mean by this whole once a fan, always a fan idea. And I think that that's kind of ridiculous, you know? Again, just because you were a fan once, like maybe, you know, you were a big fan of this band at one point, like maybe a few years back, it doesn't mean that you still have to take this band seriously or be a fan of this band if this band's music is really just not doing anything for you anymore. And also, first band does not have to mean favorite band, okay? That would be like me saying that my favorite band is Breaking Benjamin just because they were the first band that I gotten into. I personally would not say that Breaking Benjamin is my favorite band. I mean, I wouldn't even put them in the top 10. Top 20, maybe, I don't know, but definitely not top 10 for sure. You know, some of my favorite bands are actually bands that I've discovered within the last year or two, you know? So, yeah, that just goes to show that you can't let nostalgia do the talking all the time. You know, you can't let nostalgia take over your mindset. Now, as it stands, there's nothing wrong with nostalgia in of itself. However, I just don't think that you should let it do the talking for you. That's all. You know, you gotta kind of be a little more objective with the music that you listen to instead of, you know, praising one band, nothing more than nostalgia. I know that I was this way with Demon Hunter for a few years, but there was a time where I would lose my mind over Demon Hunter, nothing more than just because of how I felt about them whenever I first discovered the band. You know, I would put, you know, every band aside just because Demon Hunter was coming out with a new album. Oh, this release, that album release, who cares? Make way for Demon Hunter, everyone, you know? That's the attitude that I kind of had, especially in 2017 whenever they were coming out with their album Outlive. At that time, I don't ever remember being as excited for an album in my life. You know, and that's because I really took the band very seriously. And while I still would consider myself a Demon Hunter fan, I can't say that I'm that same fanboy like I used to be, you know, a few years back. You know, the excitement would still be there once again if they have new music coming out and whatnot, but the fanboyism would not be, you know, as relevant, I feel like. But I'm just talking from, you know, when it comes to bands that you just have no interest in. I think one example I can think of as well is Soilwork. One example I can think of is their latest album, Verklighten. I think that's their latest album. Yeah, that came out in 2019, and you know, I bought that album, and looking back, I often questioned why. The album doesn't really have the strongest replay value, in my opinion, to be honest. And that was probably the last time where I was thinking, okay, you know what? Just because I was a fan of this band years ago does not mean I still have to be a fan now, if this band is genuinely not doing anything for me. Because this is not to say that just because you've been a fan of a band for years that you should stop being a fan of that band and check out bands that you're not familiar with. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm mainly referring to bands that you know you just don't care as much about these days. For me, that would be with Soilwork, you know? I question why I even bothered with the last album that they had to offer, you know? That's really an example that I can think of. And let me tell you, it's not a good feeling, you know? It's not a good feeling, you know, just forcing yourself to check out and purchase music from a band that you know that you're not crazy about anymore, but you purchased it anyway just because you were a fan, maybe a big fan of this band years ago or something, you know? And it kind of leaves you with this unsatisfactory, I think. Now, another thing I do want to point out, this is probably the last thing I need to point out, is, and this is something I brought up briefly at the beginning of the video, and it's that the curiosity. Now, the curiosity will always be there whenever, you know, a band's new music comes out of a band that maybe you lost interest in or something. For example, Dead by April, I heard, is actually working on some new material. And you bet I'm going to check out that album if they have a new album coming out later this year or early 2021. You know, so the curiosity will always be there, you know, so but I will never purchase the album because I know that I'm not a massive fan of Dead by April anymore. And that's the thing too. There's nothing wrong with being curious and wondering, hey, how are they going to follow up the album that they came out with a few years ago? There's nothing wrong with that. You can still do that, but don't try to force yourself to be excited and have your expectations too high if they're a band that you just don't care as much about these days, or even purchase the album. I think you get the point. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.